All right, let's go ahead and kick off today's Facebook Live. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Katie Slicksky, and I am a WinField United associate. Today, we have Dan Griffin, WinField United technical seed agronomist, and Joe Rickard, WinField United senior agronomist, here to lead our discussion about everything that goes into the seed decision, what resources are available through WinField United, and answer any questions you may have. There's a lot to consider when it comes to seed selection and a lot of excitement that surrounds the discussion. So with that, Dan and Joe, I'll let you take it from here.
Perfect. Thank you, Katie. Appreciate that introduction. I'm Dan Griffin, technical seed agronomist in Ohio. I'm joined by Joe Rickard, our regional agronomist on the CPP side. So this will kind of be what we're doing today is our first session in a series of 5 sessions that WinField United will be doing called the Fundamental 5. So the first kind of 5 principles we're going to be talking about are the best local agronomic recs and management from the seed perspective. So, how do we tie in the seed decision to an agronomic recommendation? So Joe and I talk about frequently that all agronomy is local. And when we think about agronomy, for us, that seed decision is a part of that because there's so much into it goes into it from the genetic side, but also how we manage it. And we'll talk about it a little bit, how answer plots really help us to optimize the management aspects on our farm in terms of nitrogen, fungicides, and things like that. So to kick us off here, if you'll show me the slide there. Yep, thank you. So making the seed decision when we're thinking about soybeans, just to get everybody up to date in terms of trade platforms. So this is our current list of approved trade platforms there. LLGT 27, Roundup Ready to Extend, Enlist, Extend Flex, all fully approved. So the takeaway point here, select the herbicide trait to control yield limiting weeds on your farm, and then select genetics to match. So that weed control decision is so important, as important, if not more so important than a variety choice in terms of your overall yield. So use all the tools in your toolbox. We don't want to recommend one trait system over another because what may work for you may not work for another grower. For example, here in Ohio, we have a lot of growers that struggle with burn down early season, especially on mare's tail, cool, wet conditions. They really have valued the herbicide Extend-A-Max. So Extend-A-Max, Fexapan, and Genia, those approved dicamba mixes that we can use with no plant back ahead of beans. Growers love the burn down that brings them. So if that works for you, that helps you control your yield limiting weed, run with it. For other growers, maybe they have more water hemp, more Palmer Amaranth in season, and they really like the flexibility that Enlist gave them last year, where you can use 2 different modes of action at 2 different times in that post-application spray. That's great. If that's your yield limiting weed, then run with that. Extend Flex also opens the door to using Extend in that post window, which is now fully approved. So lots of different tools in the toolbox in terms of weed control options on the herbicides trait system. The first thing we want to do, again, what are your yield limiting weeds? What trait system helps you best control those weeds? And then pick genetics to match. Because as you'll see here in a second, we've got great genetics across the board in all the trait platforms we deal with. Joe, is there any comments you have on that?
No, I think you're spot on as far as, we've got, as you'll go over with what we're looking at here now in the current chart is, picking that herbicide that best fits that farm or your acreage and kind of going through there, that best local seed recommendation, that first slide that we had popped up there, and I'm not sure where you're at today, Dan, but I'm in beautiful Beloit, Ohio, where the snow is flying right now. So it may be kind of early to think about chemistry and our seed decisions, but we're right in the ballpark where we need to be.
Yeah, for those who haven't been to Beloit, it's like Vermont without the mountains. So Joe's way up there in the corner. Great place.
There you go.
Show me that next slide, please. Thank you. So when we think about, so I just said control your weeds, right? What herbicide system helps you do that? To give you some confidence in all the herbicide tolerance systems traits that we have, both in a cropland, soybean, bagging, and our partnered brands, take a look at this chart. So it's a little bit of an eye chart, but focus on the colors. So those dark greens, those are plot winners, or within the LSD, which is a statistical measure to kind of take variability out of the plot. So they're equal to the plot winner on that statistical level. So dark greens, elite performance. Light greens, that means they performed at or above trial mean. So if you look at the blue beans, those are Extend. If you look at the orange beans, those are Enlist. We're seeing good performance across all trait platforms. So definitely some varieties are standing out. This data here, this is the 2.8 set. Excuse me, the 2.8 set for Extend. When we ran this, we're seeing really good Extend performance at or above trial mean, 58.3% of the time within LSD of the winter, 38.1% of the time. But if we run this set for the 3.3 set for Ohio and Eastern Indiana, we see the Enlist having a slight edge. So the point here is not that one is better than the other. If you look at different environments, they're very, very close in terms of overall performance. But again, how do you control your weeds? Use that trait platform. Pick good genetics to match. We've got good genetics in every trait platform we vend. Excellent. Show me the next one, please, there. Perfect. Okay, so thank you. This is that 3.2 set I just referenced. So here we see a little bit of a different trend. Enlist is doing a little bit better, 40.9% of the time within the LSD of the winter. And then we see that LGT 27 at or above trial mean. So again, we're all over the place in terms of what one is slightly better. None of these numbers are huge. Again, we're emphasizing the great performing genetics in a cropland brand in any trait platform. So I kind of wrapped up.
I think one thing to keep in mind when we look at those kind of eye charts is what I'll call them here for especially our digital age users that are out here looking at this or watching this on maybe a mobile device and stuff that we're looking at there, is they can talk with their seed, their CPP rep to get some of this data from the answer plot system itself. And that's what's great about our system itself within WinField United is that holistic approach that we've got. You know, you mentioned that all agronomy is local. When you looked at those plots, you know, they're Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, that tri-state region where we have those plots located at. And we can kind of delve in further to see which ones really work in this area, maybe, and as opposed to maybe some of your counterparts out in, say, Nebraska or so.
Right. And another thing I really like about WinField United and the data we have is it is extremely accessible to our customers, our owners, and their farmers. So if there's data cuts you want to see, certain states, certain regions, work with your WinField United retailer. They'll get with the right person to get you that information. We're a big company, but we still operate kind of fleet of foot at that local level to get our customers, our owners, the information they need. So we'll transition to corn now. Look at that corn response to slide there. So a statement at the bottom, this is a big takeaway point. We use insight trial data, or some people call it plot data, and local agronomist recommendation to select which hybrids to plant. We use answer plot data to determine how to manage selected hybrids. So big takeaway there. Nobody knows the ground that you farm better than your local WinField United agronomist. And when you make that decision in concert with them, we know we can get the right product out there through our local inside trial data, plot data, training that they go through with their seed suppliers. But what we really find the value in the answer plot data is not necessarily making a product decision, but how we treat that product. So if you'll show me that slide one more time, this is kind of our general response to summary. So we've been keeping this data for 9 years. In the case of nitrogen, just for example, all the way on the right-hand side, we have a 9-year average of 66.7 bushels are at stake when it comes to getting the right amount of nitrogen on the right hybrid. So for example, we have a hybrid that's highly responsive to nitrogen, and we treat it like a low response to nitrogen hybrid. Say we are an ammonia user, and we put all our ammonia on up front, and we don't come back for side dress or a late season wide drop application. There's 66.7 bushels at risk by not dovetailing that hybrid to that correct nitrogen management practice. So those are big numbers. Those are numbers that you need to know for the hybrids that you purchase. And really that's information and data that only WinField United can give you. So we track that for nitrogen for response to fungicide. Joe and I see tremendous response to fungicide here in the Eastern Corn Belt, maybe not so much nationally, but this is all data that we can gather at that national level that is super applicable to whatever hybrid decision you make at that local level.
Yeah, so I think you're exactly right, Dan, and especially when you take a look from a CPP side and we kind of tie this whole program, this holistic approach together for us within WinField United and the retailers that we work with, especially here in Ohio. You mentioned the response to nitrogen. Those response to nitrogen scores that we get, thinking about those, how we want to manage that hybrid, and especially with our wet weather, high precipitation that we get here within the state, from the CPP side, looking at that nitrogen stabilizer to help protect that investment of nitrogen that growers are putting forth out there.
Absolutely. And another thing that Joe and I talk about a lot during the summertime is tissue testing. So, we talked a lot this past summer about when is nitrogen needed by the plant. We know that 25% of your nitrogen is taken up after tassel. Are we tissue testing to see that we have the nitrogen we put on earlier in the season available late season for grain fill? All that dovetails with kind of an in-season crop monitoring, in-season nitrogen applications on hybrids that are responsive. So this answer plot data is a piece in the puzzle to help you make the best in-season decisions that you can for the hybrids and varieties you have out there. Questions? I know we got one about, go ahead, Katie.
I think we have a few questions here. So the first one is down at the bottom of the screen. How much should I worry about corn rootworm?
Corn rootworm. That's something I got quite acquainted with this past summer. So here in the far eastern corn belt, so I'm talking timber soils, Joe, eastern Indiana and Ohio. So they're natively, for the most part, pretty poorly drained. So they're not very conducive to rootworm survivability. But on a dry year, where we don't have that soil profile filled with moisture, we see more larvae survive, become adults. So that's what we saw here in 2020, where most of our region was quite dry through the summer and late summer months. So these adults that survive, those females, they put eggs in the ground this year. They're in the ground right now. If our dry conditions continue, we have the potential to have much higher than normal rootworm pressure when those larvae come out of the ground late May, June in 2021. So from a seed side, I'm glad you brought that up, because we have a lot of growers that maybe on the rotated acre, since our pressure has been pretty low because we typically have, wetter springs here in the far eastern corn belt, have gotten away from using smart stacks or equivalent products in those high pressure situations. We want to make sure that on the non-rotated acre, corn after corn acres, we're using Smart Stacks products in a cropland bag, for example, to get 2 effective BT proteins below ground to protect those corn roots. That's the most effective way we can do that. We can also use, for example, insecticide in furrow, like a capture product. Those have very good control, probably not elite control though, like a trait would have. So 2 effective BT proteins, 1 is not enough. So for example, Triple Pro products, there's still a few of those around. Last year I walked a couple fields this past summer where we again had considerable pressure and some pretty sad stories in terms of root lodging and ultimate yield loss. So again, high pressure situations, make sure we're using Smart Stacks 2 BG proteins below ground. Joe, any comments?
I just might have to start calling you the lumberjack here now after these timber soils, timber comments here for him. You might be you're looking like you got that lumberjack beard going on there.
I'm getting close. I got the belly one. I'll promise you that.
Katie, what do we have next?
The next question is, how late can I make a fall burn down application?
Yeah, so these are some questions that I've been getting quite heavily here this fall. Some guys, some retailers, sellers out there are going to say, well, hey, we've had a frost. It's time to shut our fall burn down application down. And that's absolutely not correct. When we look at things here right now, especially when we look at the weather, at least in Ohio, right, Dan, the last week and a half, 2 weeks here now, we had a cold spell, but now we had 70, 75 degree temperatures, which was great for doing our fall burn down and fall fertility applications. So the one thing that you got to keep in mind before we shut down fall burn down applications is when the nighttime temperature is at 28 degrees or below for more than 4 hours, then that's probably when we need to shut down our fall burn down applications. But as long as we're above that freezing temperature, where those cells are not rupturing within that plant, we should be good to go.
Those are great comments, Joe. And I think, in Ohio, as we see more minimum till, maybe just like a vertical tillage tool, something that really doesn't do much from a soil standpoint, but really more residue management. Of course, we have a bunch of no-till. Fall is the time to control your perennial weeds. So your dandelions, your thistles, those now is the time to really get after those, as those perennial plants are taking down those sugars to survive over winter. We want them to take a load of herbicide with them too. So lots of opportunity in a dry fall to get those under control.
Yeah, planning for 2021, we just talked about spending a lot of time on the seed. It all starts right now in the fall of 2020 with our herbicide application, getting cleaning a clean field for a stand for next year.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, so the next question that we have is, if I apply MAP or DAP this fall, can I count on some of that nitrogen in the springtime?
So when we look at these fall fertility applications of mono ammonium phosphate or diammonium phosphate, our MAP and DAP acronyms, there is we're making those applications from a phosphorus standpoint here that we look at, not from a nitrogen standpoint. So Dan mentioned the precipitation, the heavy precipitation, snowfall we have, especially where I'm at in Northeast Ohio and all throughout the state where we stay pretty wet. You can't really count on that nitrogen as it's going to be readily leachable and kind of probably be there when you get to the springtime.
Yeah, those are great comments too. We talked a little bit earlier about we want nitrogen to be available later in the season. Modern hybrids don't take up more nitrogen; they take up nitrogen later. So we can't really count on fall nitrogen to be around at that time. But if you don't believe us, take a tissue test. Identify what nutrients are yield limiting for you. That's a great first step in that springtime, maybe once those nodal roots get down that V6, V7 timeframe to see if what you're like in terms of nitrogen uptake, see if you have any deficiencies.
Okay, so we have another question. In what form and when should I apply sulfur on my farm?
So when we look here, sulfur has become one of those ever-evolved nutrients here with the kind of environmental factors that we've had, these green scrubbers, environmentalists and stuff, especially in the Ohio River Valley where we're at. They've cleaned up a lot of those emissions. So we're not getting as much free sulfur as what we used to back in the day. So when we look at sulfur here right now for fall application and putting that in with your fall fertility plan, that's a great time to do it. But we need to look at what is the form of sulfur that we're going to put at. We need to use an elemental form of sulfur there, not a sulfate form of sulfur. The reason for that is, again, it goes back to our precipitation and our moisture that we have within our soils, is that sulfate, just like nitrate, that ATE at the end is going to be readily leachable, and that's not going to be readily available for our crop come the springtime here now. So, Dan, you got the exact numbers when we look at roughly 30 pounds for 200 bushel corn, 22 pounds for 100 bushel soybeans, right? Those are some astronomical numbers, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's more than a trace element, right, Joe? That's more than, especially in a high rainfall environment we see here in the East, that we're going to be able to natively get out of the soil every year. So if you haven't put on sulfur, if you haven't tried it in the past, and maybe put some out there, especially in the case of corn. 50% of your sulfur is taken up after tassel. Really important nutrient for grain fill. Might be something to look at. I'll say one more thing about elemental sulfur that Joe mentioned earlier, and he's exactly right. Sulfur is cool because we can mix up the form of it and still have it available for that springtime. So that elemental sulfur you may put out in the fall, especially the products that WinField United vends, they're held together, very tiny particles in a clay-based material, kind of like Pell lime would be. The finer the grind, the faster it works. So with the high-quality materials that we vend, we get some oxygen, some heat on that. Come spring, summer next year, it's going to be available at exactly the right time, that late season, to match our uptake curves in corn. Go ahead, Katie.
We have one last question. So what are the tools available to help determine the response to scores?
Great question there. So R7 is the place from a WinField United perspective where those response scores live, and they're updated every year as we get our data flow for the hybrids that come in. R7, it can be accessed by your local WinField United dealer. Also a platform like field forecasting tool, which we won't get into today, but that takes into account those response scores in terms of the nitrogen it's modeling. So very valuable information. Please contact your WinField United dealer to get that.
Yeah, Dan, the other piece that I'd add in there is those response to scores itself. I mean, we often heard about it, back in the day of the rainbow chart, on all that response. So if you've ever heard of the rainbow chart out there and where you're at, that's what we're referring to there. So.
One more thing to kind of tie in that seed discussion. Could you put up that last slide, please? So final points, just to kind of put a bow on the making the seed decision discussion. So on soybeans, we want to remember two things. Select the herbicide tolerance trait to control yield limiting weeds on your farm, and then select genetics to match. Control the weeds. We've got the genetics in every herbicide trait in terms of performance to meet that need. And also remember that genetics determines yield potential, not herbicide tolerant trait. Don't believe the folks that are saying Enlist is always better or Extend is always better, Extend Flex is always better. We need to dive a little bit deeper and remember that the genetics behind those varieties, that's determining the yield potential. The herbicide tolerance trait is only useful from a weed control perspective. On the corn side, use inside trial data or plot data and local agronomist recommendation to select which hybrids to plant, and use answer plot data to determine how to manage those hybrids. That's the great value of answer plot data, the value add into making sure that every input you put on that acre, especially our most expensive one of seed and nitrogen, those two, that we're maximizing those for optimal ROI on every acre. And also don't sleep on corn rootworm. I'm telling you, if it stays dry, it's going to be an issue for us. Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that kind of wraps up on what we've got to present with them today, right, Dan? Other than you probably need to keep working on your lumberjack beard.
Well, I am working on. I've also got this here. I guess my mustache game is pretty weak, so I'll keep working on that too.
Can't beat the real thing, buddy. Thanks for watching, everybody today. I'll turn it back over to Katie.
Yes, thank you both for leading the discussion today. Thank you all for joining. And again, for more information, visit the link below, www.winfieldunited.com.
Thank you.
Thank you.